Prince Street is brought to you by Dean and DeLuca, purveyors of the finest food since 1977. With over 40 stores around the world, Dean and DeLuca curates the best ingredients for life. Fullness. On the one hand, there's that primal sensation of feeling stuffed. Like, oh man, I just ate so much. I ate everything in sight. Everything. All of it. The cheese plate, the meat plate, the pigs in blankets, shrimp cocktails, carved roasts, a Jell-O mold. I can't take another bite. At least, I don't think I can. On the other hand, there's the fullness of gratitude. You made this for me? You took the time? I'm overwhelmed. I am grateful. And then there's ingesting culture, literally, like my 7-meal day in Montreal and that 24-hour dim sum binge in Hong Kong. Wait, did I say I was full? Maybe just one more bite. Welcome to Prince Street.
I'm Howie Kahn. On this episode, we're looking at what fullness means to people. Not just feeling stuffed after an epic meal, but as completeness and the opposite of emptiness. We talked to Paul Friedman, the Yale historian and author of the new book, 10 Restaurants That Changed America. He explores the predatory splendor of 19th century feasts and how dining out led to a more sexualized society.
There were restaurants that had a kind of annex with a separate door that offered, for double the price, the food from the main restaurant. Anytime you wanted it at 2 a.m., no problem. And they had a little dining room and an adjoining bedroom.
And veteran sports writer Tim Struby takes us to Coney Island to report on an athlete whose victory depends on how fast he can get full.
Count it down with me from 3, 2, 1, go!
And later in the show, one of my favorite Madeleine moments, from the star of Full Metal Jacket and the current hit series Stranger Things.
My father was a drive-in theater manager, and when I was growing up, we used to spend a lot of time in the snack bar.
Plus, Noah Bernamoff learns about a new delivery service that can fulfill your restaurant cravings from 47 different states. And Eden Grinsphan takes us to the home of the very best hamburger in New York City. It's also a pizza joint. Don't go away.
You're submissive all night. You're trying to please these people. They have money that you're dependent on, the power dynamics all off.
That's author Stephanie Danler, whose debut novel, Sweetbitter, is the summer's breakout bestseller. Next up, Stephanie reads from her book, which was inspired by her days as a backwaiter at Union Square Cafe. But first, she talks about the fullness of her life there, with a former customer, Jay McInerney, whose own first novel, Bright Lights, Big City, she pays homage to in hers.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Jay. Thank you so much for having me.
Stephanie, as I believe you know, this month's theme is fullness, and I feel like you have something to tell us about that.
Well, it's interesting because when you say that word, the first thing that jumps to mind was one of my motivations in writing Sweetbitter, which is to show that waiting tables or being in the service industry could be an incredibly full life, that it wasn't just a means to an end, that it came complete with health benefits and vacations, and that people were growing within the industry and had children and owned homes. And that was a shift from every other restaurant that I'd ever worked in. And I felt like people still didn't realize that this life didn't leave you lacking. It didn't mean you had failed at something else. It really was not the means, but it was the end.
And yet there are, in your book, many, many people for whom serving is a way of paying the rent while they pursue another dream in the city.
Yeah, absolutely. This is based on Union Square Cafe, and a place with an ethic like Danny Meyer's. He really adds a layer of meaning that allows people to stay there for years and years. He has such low turnover. There were servers at Union Square Cafe that had been there since 1985.
Yeah.
And it's because of the fullness of that life that he was able to offer them. And that's extremely rare. I mean, there are very few restaurants that can pull that off. So Sweetbitter follows a year in the life of a young woman who moves to New York City and gets a job in the service industry. And what happens is she falls head over heels in love with that world. The first sentence is, "You will develop a palate," and really nothing else happens in the novel. She develops a palate, but what is that palate for? Is it for food, wine, for drugs, for intimacy, for lust, for family? And learning to navigate those experiences is her coming of age.
Yeah, it seems to be in some ways very eventful, but as you're describing it, I realize that almost the entire book takes place in the workplace. And Tess's life outside of the work, she doesn't really seem to have a life outside of the workplace.
She doesn't. It gets very narrow. And at first that's exhilarating because of the amount of attention she can give everything. But at points it turns claustrophobic, which was my experience in restaurants as well.
Did you come to New York with the intention of writing a novel, or was your ambition more vague than that?
No, I finished undergrad and I came to New York City to be a writer, but I'd been working in restaurants since I was 15 years old. I had never done anything else. So I went directly into restaurants. Shockingly, no one was waiting for me at the bridge ready to accept my novel. And that turned into 9 years in the restaurant industry before I got back to it.
You know, when I arrived here, the food wasn't very good, but we didn't really care. But it seems that there really is, even among young people, a really powerful and kind of tribal culture of food and hospitality.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stephanie, what years were you at Union Square Cafe?
I was there from 2006 to 2007.
As was I.
Yes, I remember you.
But you never waited on me.
No. I was not a server. I was a back waiter. And that meant I wasn't allowed to talk to people like you. I still drank Yellowtail from the liquor store. They were not going to let me go up to your table.
Well, that's a shame for me.
Yeah, you would have been very confused and said, "Where's the actual server?"
I think you have a little excerpt that you're going to read for us.
Yeah, I do. Sweetbitter follows the seasons, and this is the opening of the season of winter, when things have begun to turn a bit dark, as they do in New York City when it gets cold. After service, the dishwasher rolled up the sticky bar mats, and the smell of rot rose from the blackened grout in the tiles. The kitchen was a hollow amphitheater of stainless steel, still, but holding the after effects of the fires and banging and shouting. 2 kitchen boys were scrubbing every surface, rubbing out the night. 2 servers sat on the low boy eating pickled red onions from a metal tin. Leftover ice cream sat on the bread station, turning to soup. "Hey, new girl, I'm in here." "Me?" Jake was in the doorway of a walk-in. He had a cup full of lemon wedges in his hand. His apron was streaked with wine, his shirt sleeves were rolled high, and I could see his veins. "Are you allowed to be in there?" "What I meant is, do you think about me the way I think about you?" "Did you like them?" he asked. "The oysters?" When he said the word oysters, their flavor flamed on my tongue as if it had been lying dormant. "Yes, I think I do." "Come in here." "Are we going to get locked in?" What I meant is, I'm scared. Inside, there were 2 open beers, the Schneider Weiss Aventinus, a bottle I'd pulled for the bar but never tasted. The beers were propped against a cardboard box labeled greens but filled with little neck clams. We were in the seafood closet. Crimson tuna fillets, marbled salmon sides, snowy cod. The air nipped at my skin, smelling like the barest trace of sea. Jake dug through a wooden crate labeled with masking tape Kumamoto's. He pulled out 2 tiny rocks, discarded the debris that clung to the outside. A strand of seaweed stuck to his pants. "They look so filthy," I whispered. "They're a secret. Quite a leap of faith." His voice was quiet with the motor of the fridge, and I involuntarily shivered and moved toward him. He pulled a blunt knife out of his pocket and wedged the tip into an invisible crack, 2 switches of his wrist, and it was open. "Where'd you learn to do that?" He pinched a lemon over it and said, Take it quickly. I flipped the shell back. I was prepared for the brininess, for the softness of it, for the rigidity and strangeness of the ritual. Adrenalized, fiercely private. I panted slightly and opened my eyes. Jake was looking at me and said, "They're perfect." He handed me the beer. It was nearly black, persuasive as chocolate, weighty. The finish was cream, and it matched the oyster's creaminess. The sensory conspiracy made the blood rush to my head. My skin broke out in goosebumps. Ignore him. Look away. I looked at him. Can I have another?
Beautiful.
Trouble.
I get the sense from your book that the restaurant staff forms a kind of insular core, kind of like cops or soldiers, as if the customers are essentially civilians, and that there's an almost unbridgeable divide between the staff and the customers. In your days as a waitress, did you feel that way? Did you find yourself possibly looking down or at least out at the people you were serving?
Yeah, well, I mean, you look down, but really while you're serving, you're constantly looking up at these people, and the down is kind of a reaction. You're just trying to reassert some control because you're submissive all night. You're trying to please these people. They have money that you're dependent on, the power dynamics all off.
Yeah,
and so in order to restore it at the end of the night, you, one, get into a lot of trouble, but you also talk shit on the guests. That's how order is restored.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you arrived at Union Square, you didn't know about oysters and truffles and black truffles and white truffles and so on, and Burgundy and Chenin Blanc. No, okay.
I was a competent waitress, though, more competent than my character.
And did you, like Tess, have a mentor, someone who taught you about how oysters should taste and how Gevrey Chambertin should taste? And
Yum. No, I didn't have a specific mentor, but the mentoring happened through the culture and through all the initiation rites. And then I just love to learn, so I started studying immediately. And when I got the opportunity to help open up a wine store, that was when I left Union Square Cafe. I just ignited this appetite for knowledge and to learn about wine and food.
Now, you mentioned graduate school earlier. Did you go to graduate school before or after you were at Union Square Cafe?
After 10 years after. Oh, okay. Yeah, it was one of those very fraught, terrifying decisions to leave my career in restaurants and go back to school. But I had the idea, and I finished the manuscript in the 2 years I was there. I just
Did you find that helpful? The creative writing
Did I find it helpful?
Yeah.
I think it is an incredibly indulgent degree, but I finished a first draft of a novel. I worked frenzied and crazily, and
so it worked.
It worked. Yeah, I think if you go in with a goal, and maybe I was also 30. It helps to have a few years under your belt.
Well, your book has had a tremendous reception, and this is not the typical first novelist's experience. It's an extraordinary first novel, and I think that we will be talking about it for years to come.
Thank you.
For a chance to win a signed copy of Sweetbitter, keep an eye on our Twitter at @Prince_Street_. Sports writer Tim Struby has covered world-class competitions for decades. Manny Pacquiao fights in Macau, F1 races in Sao Paulo, World Cup skiing in the Austrian Alps. But for Prince Street, he discovered a sport and an athlete unlike any he's ever seen before. Meet Yasser Salem and the crazy world of competitive eating.
Hemingway said there are only 3 sports: bullfighting, motor racing, and mountaineering. All the rest are merely games. Well, I'm betting Papa never made it out to Coney Island for the famous Nathan's hot dog eating contest. The annual event is the Super Bowl of the competitive eating circuit, a rarefied world that regularly tests the boundaries of human consumption. This year, thousands watched firsthand and millions on TV as 31 contestants waged gastronomic war to see who could eat the most hot dogs in 10 minutes. One such contestant seeking eating immortality was Yasir Salem. Since making his competitive eating debut in 2008, Salem is now ranked number 9 in the Major League Eater rankings and holds the world record for sweet corn. 47 years in 12 minutes. When I met Yasser on the morning of the contest, I expected him to be the size of a Jets offensive lineman. What I found instead was a lean, laid-back 35-year-old competitive triathlete who works by day as a Manhattan marketing director. So how the hell did he find himself stuffing his face on a regular basis?
I have really odd sense of humor. Honestly, it was all a big joke, and it was supposed to be a prank on my friends. What I wanted to do was to qualify for Nathan's and be on ESPN on the 4th of July and just not tell anybody, and then have my friends turn on the TV and see me on TV. It didn't work out that way. It was a 4-year journey to follow through on that prank, so the prank was on me. Now I'm super deep into competitive eating and I can't get out.
You have to ask yourself regularly. Your wife probably has to ask you, why?
I don't see myself as a competitive eater. I just like really unique experiences. I do like competition. You know, I do Ironmans, I do marathons. That's the way I explain it. Maybe it's the way that I have rationalized it. You know, I don't.
I caught an early A train to Coney Island, and by 10 a.m., I joined thousands of fans already packed around the stage on Surf Avenue. Men in straw boater hats, women holding up foam hot dogs. A Trump fan held up a sign, "Make America Poop Again." On the boardwalk, I found people from every imaginable walk of life, including an old friend, Anthony Carino, co-star of the HGTV series Kitchen Cousin. Anthony, what is bringing you to Coney Island today?
In all my life, born and raised in New Jersey, never made it to Coney Island for the hot dog competition. So I figured no time like the present, man. So this is it. We're at the iconic spot. We got lines and lines of people. It's out of control. Baby blue skies. The rides are cranking. People are having a good time. I'm a hot dog fan. My personal best, Yankee game with my cousin. With the pregame and the game itself, I did a dozen dogs. In my mid-20s when I had the ability to put it down. I couldn't do it today if I tried. I couldn't. I just couldn't.
Okay, there's no doubt that the Nathan's contest is a spectacle. But what I don't get is eating a sport. So I ask Yasser, and what do I discover? There's a hell of a lot more to competitive eating than meets the eye.
There's 3 things that you should do when you're going into a contest. You focus on technique, number 1, most importantly, capacity, which means do you have the capacity in your stomach to handle it? And then finally, speed. You should approach each one of those individually. With technique, if you do 2 or 3 minutes worth of specific training, like looking at your food, like corn, for example, which I won this year with a world record, I was really, really set on that goal. I looked at the corn and the way that people were eating, which is like the typewriter method, which is the way people normally eat. And I saw that it was really wearing out my jaw, and it was like the accepted way of doing it. And I just thought, there's no way that's like the best way to do it. And then I just randomly saw this video on YouTube, this Turkish kid that ate a corn on the cob like with the top of his teeth like a scraper, and he did it in like 10 seconds. I was like, that's the way to do it. What is your innovation? Like, can you make this better? And that's where you can level the playing field with the top eaters. So that's technique. The other thing that you need to do is make sure you have the capacity to do it. For most of these contests, you need to be able to eat at least 4 to maybe 8 pounds of food. And you can simulate that with like water. So what that means is like over the course of those 4 to 6 weeks, every morning, just progressively add a little bit more. You're not going to get to a gallon. And then finally, speed. And the way I do it is I videotape all my practices. I graph all of it out, and I look for little improvements over the course of those 4 to 6 weeks. You know, we're not just shoving food in our mouth. All these parts need to make sense and get put together. And it seems simple enough because we make it look effortless, but it's really not.
What's your goal for today?
40. 40 is my number, and I would love to get 3rd place.
Well, we will see you on stage, and we'll come and see how you feel afterwards. Attention turns to the stage. There, longtime contest MC George Shea is wearing a straw boater's hat and blue blazer. He does his best P.T. Barnum as he introduces the contestants.
His name is Yasser Salem. He ate 34 cannolis in 6 minutes. He ate 47 ears of corn in 10. Let me hear it for Yasser Salem!
Standing on stage with Yasser are some of the biggest heavyweights of competitive eating. As eating contests have evolved into an internationally recognized sport, prize money has reached the tens of thousands, and eaters like Matt Stoney and Joey Jaws Chestnut, the LeBron James of competitive eating, have become household names. Yasser may be well-versed in the fundamentals of technique, capacity, speed, but today at Coney Island, in Nathan's famous hot dog eating contest, he's up against some of the all-time greats.
Ever a time for submission. Ladies and gentlemen, the former champion of the world here to take back what was once his, Joey Chestnut!
Yasser and his fellow competitors take their places behind gratuitous piles of hot dogs. The ESPN cameras are rolling. The crowd is starving for action. Fans chomping at the bit. I'm almost out of food metaphors, so let the Hunger Games begin.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is go time now, and just remember, every time a competitor eats a hot dog, an angel gets its wings. Count it down with me from 3, 2, 1, go!
2.5 minutes into the contest, and Joey Chestnut has already polished off 25 dogs and buns, a record-setting pace. Yasser's cruising along, head down, eyes on the prize. Me? I'm simultaneously amazed and horrified at what I'm witnessing. Whatever artistry Yasser spoke of is lost on my untrained eye. It looks, in fact, like a bunch of grown men shoving food into their mouths.
Chestnut is a man with determination. He is focused. He cannot see you. He cannot hear you. He is in his own place.
And I fear I've spoken too soon. Yasser's hit a wall. Dogs and buns just aren't going down easy, and he's steadily losing ground.
1 minute and 30 seconds on my mark. 1 minute and 30 seconds now.
With 90 seconds left, all eyes are on Joey Chestnut. He's practically counting his $10,000 payday, and the crowd is hoping that he'll break his own world record of 73.5 dogs.
1 minute now. Joey Chestnut is less than 10 away from the world record. It can't be done, but he might be able to match his personal best prior to that. The heat is too great. 50 seconds.
A minute to go, and I'm feeling Yasser's pain. He's at the point where it's simply mind over meat, and the meat is winning.
It's slipping away. It's slipping away. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Put down your hot dog now. Oh, my glory.
Like that, the 100th annual Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest is over. Crowd favorite Joey Chestnut, while not setting a world record, crushes his nemesis Matt Stoney by a count of 70-53. Yasser, with 31 dogs, ties for 7th place. Remarkably, all the competitors appear cool and collected. No one's bowled over in pain, no one's collapsing from the heat and nitrates. In the mass of the dispersing humanity, I somehow track down Yasser, a man beaten, perhaps a bit bloated, but far, far from broken.
How you feeling?
I still have a little bit more room left in me, and to be honest with you, I'm a little disappointed with my number. I should have put up a few more. I was expecting of the 40 number, and I know I'm capable of it. I'll have to redeem myself in the short term. Thankfully, there's a contest coming up in a week in Vegas, so I'll make myself feel better about this loss. It wasn't, horrible. I got 31, and that's pretty good, yeah. But I was expecting more. This is the top of our sport. It's the biggest event. I got to come back. I'll be back.
And no more hot dogs for you today?
No. We're good. We're good on hot dogs for a while.
Since this was recorded, Yasser went to Las Vegas and finished 5th in the Hooters Worldwide Wing Eating Championships with 138 wings in 10 minutes.
Still hungry? Good. There's more. Now it's time for Eden Eats NYC with Eden Grinsphan.
The burger's changed our lives.
The burger has changed your lives, and it has changed mine too. Seriously, not just saying this. Best burger I've had, I think, in my life. just sitting down now with husband and wife team, Matt and Emily Highland, the owners of Emily, one of the most popular restaurants in Brooklyn right now. Not only known for its incredible pizza, but actually really famous for its burger, the Emmy burger. So I'm thrilled to sit here with you guys to hear about your story. The theme of this podcast for this episode is Fullness. What is it about comforting, really delicious food that make people excited?
It's just really food that we like to eat. I think the philosophy here is we cook for ourselves, and then we hope people like it as well.
I do think, though, that when we moved to Brooklyn and Matt was in transition from the last job he was in, he got his hands on pizza dough, even after a decade in the food world, cooking all different sorts of things, that pizza was what he wanted to do.
It was his calling.
Yeah, pizza's calling.
And what were you doing before?
I've worked in food service in my college years and that sort of thing, but I was a high school English teacher and administrator and a yoga teacher.
Do you ever incorporate yoga with your pizza?
We did a yoga and pizza making workshop when we first opened. It was really
I love
cool.
that.
It was all about channeling your energy from your heart out into your fingertips and then putting all of that love into the dough.
Well, no wonder your pizza tastes so good. You're channeling your inner chakra.
Yeah, if that's what she says it is, then that's definitely what it is.
How does it feel to be not only known for your pizza, but to really, get all of this press and excitement around your burger?
It's been pretty bonkers. The dining room gets surreal at the moment when we run out of burgers on like a Saturday night or whatever, and the wait list is still very long. People need to get here early to have the burger, but I just think that it's given us traction that we never anticipated, and feel really grateful for that because it's been life-changing for us.
So why the burger? Why did you decide to put a burger on the menu if this is a pizzeria?
Basically, just it was something for me to eat after service, sort of a selfish reason. And I designed a burger the way I wanted it to taste and how I wanted it and what my ideal burger would be. And then, when we first opened and started specialing it, we'd sell, 2 or 3 a night. And then all of a sudden it just took off.
So this burger is basically your dream burger that's turned into everyone else's dream burger. So thank you for that. So tell me a little bit about this burger. Obviously, it sits on a pretzel bun. I think everyone can tell that.
It's really just another way to have pretzels in house for me to eat them, sort of thing. Like, I don't really get out a lot to eat certain foods. Like, I don't know where to get a pretzel. So if I have pretzel buns in house, I can eat a pretzel when I want to.
Okay, and this burger, the meat, you're using dry-aged ground beef.
I like the dry-aged. It's a little bit different than like a regular, just straight grass-fed because it's a little funkier. It's a little more interesting, and I think it goes better with all the sweet and salty and fatty kind of condiments we have on the burger.
When you grill it up, it literally smells like a steak from a steakhouse. So you treat it like a steak.
Definitely. It is a ground up steak. That's how I want to treat it, and I want to respect it and grill it nicely, rest it, season it properly, just treat it like a real piece of meat. I think
it
cheddar
melts really well.
Yeah, it melts well too. I also think cheddar and caramelized onions is a great combo.
And those caramelized onions, don't get me started. It's like sweet onion butter.
It is sweet onion butter.
It is so good.
Yeah, they take a long time to make. It's about 9 hours or so, and they melt down.
And then you have that secret sauce.
The Emmy sauce.
I just think this burger has that really delicious, rich, but balanced flavor where you get the spiciness from the sauce and the sweetness from the onions, and then you have the cheese and that burger, which is just it is honestly just like meat. Essence. It's like the essence of meatiness. But the burger is named after you, which I think is really cute.
I mean, a large part of this is, family support and Emily support and just everyone rallying around us. Our entire family was just so helpful opening this and so supportive that, it's like our home basically here.
I feel really, really lucky that we've been able to achieve a really good community of neighbors and regulars and people who work for us here. So yeah, half the menu is named for staff members at this point too, I think.
Well, you guys are really killing it. I look forward to many more pizza and burger nights with you.
To learn how to make the Emmy burger with Chef Matthew Hyland, go to livefromprincestreet.com. Even Silicon Valley is starting to find ways to fill us up. Not with meal replacements like Soylent, but with food from your favorite restaurants in the country. Up next, Noah Bernamoff takes a break from pastrami to cover the tech beat.
So we're here at Mile End, my restaurant. This is Noah Bernamoff, your Food From Afar correspondent. We're talking about fullness for food, and fullness of experience of food. And so I'm here with Joe Ariel of Delivery.com fame, but frankly, Gold Belly stardom. Joe is essentially known as the Marco Polo of food. He travels the nation looking for America's most influential, symbolic, ethnically diverse foods from all corners of the country and brings them straight to your front door using his awesome website, Gold Belly. That's 1L. So Joe, how's it going?
It's going well. Good. I'm glad to be here with this poutine in front of me.
Yeah. Let's just jump right in. I mean, Gold Belly obviously is an idea that grew out of Delivery.com. Delivery.com is a delivery service that gets food from restaurants to your front door very locally and hyper locally, within a couple of miles of where you live. Gold Belly is kind of the opposite. It gets food from around the country, places that maybe you'll never go or you have no desire to go except to eat that one food. But it gives you access to those things, again, straight to your front door, super convenient. I think it's obvious why you're doing it, but why are you doing it?
Yeah, so I went to school in Nashville, Tennessee. And in my time there, growing up in New York, I didn't really know what good barbecue was, biscuits, pecan pie. And I experienced this in college, and it opened up this whole new world to me. 10 years later, fast forward, I'm back in New York City, missing those tastes and the nostalgia from my past. And in running Delivery.com, I realized outside of this hyper-local loop, there is so much out there that people like me would want based on nostalgia, which is so important for food, based on craft of people that regionally are doing something that's so special that people on a local level, depending on where they live, might not offer. So I realized there's a huge market, called in several favors from some of the Nashville food makers that I knew and loved. They sent me some stuff, and it was amazing. I would open the box and smell the barbecue, smell the biscuits, and the nostalgia almost literally brought me to tears. It was then I realized there's a huge opportunity. You know the legend of Captain Goldbelly, right?
I don't.
Okay.
I'd love to hear it.
So he was an old spaceship captain who would travel around the world, but rather than killing people and dragging them back, he would find the most delicious foods in every different region and place that he went, bring it back to the people. They gave him the nickname Captain Goldbelly because the food was better than gold.
Interesting.
My first two companies were Eats.com and Delivery.com, very literal, very straight to the point. This one, we wanted to be weird and quirky. So it started as literally my taste buds and places that I knew, had visited, had wanted to try from across the country. And the coolest thing is now we have people every day, hundreds of people giving us tips for certain things that they want from their hometown, from a place they went to college, from a place they visited that they want to see on the site. So the 3 states that we don't have food makers that sell on Gold Belly right now are North Dakota, Nebraska, and Iowa. Not yet.
So I would love to put it out to the Prince Street listeners in the great states of North Dakota, Nebraska, and Iowa to please email team@goldbelly.com, and I want you guys to recommend an awesome local place that ought to be selling its wares on Gold Belly. Have you ever come out of a meeting and been like, today is the first day of the rest of my life?
Well, yes. So I grew up eating Joe's Pizza in Greenwich Village. We've been working with the team there for years to perfect their pizza, to be able to deliver that nationwide. We tried and tried and tried, and it was close, it was close, it was closer. The day when I bit into that crust and I tasted that Joe's Pizza tang, the crust on the bottom was charred, the cheese on the top was bubbling, and I knew we were ready for launch. Not gonna lie, shed a few tears that day.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for this poutine that's putting me in a food coma.
Last month, I sat down and had an incredible conversation with Yale professor Paul Friedman. He's the author of a fascinating new book called 10 Restaurants That Changed America. Paul argues that restaurants like Delmonico's in New York and Chez Panisse in Berkeley not only revolutionized what we eat, they also helped give rise to social change in this country. Thanks so much for being here, and thanks for writing this book.
Thank you for having me here with you.
This episode's about fullness, and so I want to kind of double down on this idea of Delmonico's being a place with so much opportunity to get absolutely stuffed. Interestingly, the restaurant opened as a pastry shop. There were two brothers. They were from the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland. They had almost no restaurant experience. One of them was trained as a pastry chef.
Right. But they must have been adaptable because they were from Switzerland, which is landlocked, yet one of them had an earlier career as a sailor and even as a sea captain. So they must have been quick learners.
Where do you think their ambition came from?
I think it came from the same place that a lot of European immigrants and then later immigrants from all over came, the sense that they could build an enterprise in a world that was more open and that was underserved. So the pastry shop was very successful, not because there were no other pastry shops, but because they took more care with their ingredients. Their coffee was praised as the best available in New York. They had a variety of pastries that, while standard in Europe, were unknown in America, where pies and puddings were basically the rule for dessert. So they were fanatics, and often being a fanatic and being enterprising go together.
Which is what food culture is all about now.
Certainly the case now. They didn't like the produce available in New York markets. So in 1840, they bought a farm in Williamsburg and supplied their own produce.
What did it look like? The original location, the 156 Beaver Street, the Citadel, they called it.
It was flanked by classical columns that were said to have been dug up at Pompeii. It would be decorated with their three key elements: wood paneling, chandeliers, and mirrors. So gaslight, which gives off a particular kind of glow. They would have some carpeting at times, but usually parquet floors. The original Delmonico's was the first New York restaurant to have something other than sawdust on the floors. Delmonico's offers a choice of dishes to order, a choice of times when you can show up, and you can eat with the people you came with rather than dining at a common table, what we would now call family style.
This restaurant really just took off. People loved it, praised it. Oscar Wilde said the two most impressive sights in America were Delmonico's and the Yosemite Valley.
That's pretty amazing. And he said this 50 years after the restaurant opened. So it's not only that it was wildly popular immediately, but that until really the end of the 19th century, it was the dominant restaurant in the entire United States. And you find in places like Omaha or New Bern, North Carolina, people opening restaurants and calling them Delmonico's. They invented a number of cuts of meat or dishes like lobster Newburg.
Could a normal person get a table at Delmonico's?
Yes. I don't have the feeling that there were always lines or that they were particularly discriminating. They had regular customers, as all restaurants do. But one of the things that the 20th century seems to invent is the notion of Siberia, that the people who are favored somehow like the idea that other customers are exiled to a less desirable space.
A writer in Harper's Weekly in 1884 called Delmonico's an agency of civilization. And I think you make the argument that all 10 of these restaurants are, in fact, agencies of civilization. So what do you mean by that?
Before Delmonico's, people, of course, dined out, but they had crude, unsophisticated food, big roast pieces of roast meat, and badly made vegetables and not much else. So agency of civilization is not just a question of manners, but of taking a kind of civilized pleasure in food. The 19th century is much more elaborate and splendid than anything we have available.
Restaurants really seem to start us on our path of socializing in public in a different and more elaborate way. You could host people in a restaurant. You could be part of a big party. You could attend a party, things you could only do in a home before. So in a way, restaurants started extroverting society.
That's right, extroverting particularly middle class, upper middle class society. Very rich people, and certainly the nobility in the period before the 19th century, would entertain in their palaces. And so they could have 200 guests, no problem. Even well-off people of the middle class, people in business or medicine or law, couldn't quite manage parties of that size. The restaurant allows you to show off in a way that is polite or helpful, as opposed to simply driving a better car than your neighbor. You actually know what wine to order, or you have been to the restaurant before and can tell people to stay away from the chicken fricassee and order the pheasant instead.
Right. For elaborate as these restaurants were, the menus almost read like rough drafts of American culinary culture because they're so long. You know, the Schraff's menu you mentioned has 328 different selections. The early Delmonico's menu from 1838 is 11 pages.
Right. It has something like a dozen veal dishes alone.
Right now, people say this is a big moment in American food. People say it's a golden age. Your book kind of argues there's been a lot of golden ages, and some of them started in the 19th century where people were absolutely food crazy.
A French critic, the first real restaurant reviewer, a man named Grimaud de la Reynière, in 1805 says, those pre-revolutionary banquets involved way too many dishes. People would have 200 dishes for the first course. I think 100 is a more modest number for the first of three courses. 100 separate dishes set out.
What if you get stuck sitting next to the worst person at the table? You're there forever.
You're screwed.
You're screwed.
But you are today, too. By 1891, in a gastronomic journal, they suggest 10 dishes set out as the first course. What was it, that people were from another planet and had a different digestive system?
It feels like a very refined version of Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, speaking as a medieval historian, which is my day job, is very authentic as regards food. Not over pedantic authentic, but there's a lot of food just as there's a lot of sex. But yes, it's a splendor and a kind of predatory splendor.
I wonder if there's any ties from, the early success of restaurants and the early fun of it all to a more sexualized society. Eating out can be a really sexy thing.
I think so, because I try to emphasize in my book the fun issue. I think it is also an era of greater sexual tension, attractiveness, activity. I'm not sure I claim to be very much of an expert on that, but you don't have the impression that people are constantly checking their phones at Delmonico's.
Well, part of the subtext of the Delmonico's chapter is if somebody takes somebody to Delmonico's, they will get laid.
Yes, okay. There are different options too. You could also
maybe the next day because they've had 55 courses.
Well, that was I was thinking.
There's a lot of aphrodisiacs involved.
You might have some performance anxiety, but there also were restaurants, not, I hasten to add, Delmonico's, which prohibited actually men and women couples from being in a private room.
Because they knew what would happen.
Well, they suspected what would happen and didn't want any part of it. But if that was what you wanted, and particularly if your companion was not your respectable official companion, there were restaurants, fancy restaurants, that had a kind of annex with a separate door that offered for double the price the food from the main restaurant. Anytime you wanted it at 2 a.m., no problem. And they had a little dining room and an adjoining bedroom. Many of these banquets, of course, men would bring their wives or perhaps women who were not their wives, but for women actually to be able to go out by themselves or to organize parties for themselves begins only towards the end of the 19th century. Schrafft's was a restaurant that many people may remember. It was a chain. It closed around 1980, but it was a genteel but fairly complete menu restaurant that was among the first to cater to women not accompanied by men. That is to say, women who were shopping or women who were working in offices or in retail establishments. And by cater to women, that means partly a sort of safe space, a nice but not expensive place, and food that was both light, particularly for the main course, and elaborate, particularly for the desserts. And that's what women were thought to like. Restaurants that, like Schrafft's and some other lunch places like Child's, which is a big chain of very ultra-respectable lunch establishments, stayed open later, and they got a different crowd late at night. The gay community of New York, for example, congregated at many branches of Child's and even Schrafft's after 8 p.m. or so.
Which was also, I'm sure, a new social horizon.
Very much so.
For minority communities, gay communities, to be able to have a place to gather.
That's right. Probably the first place that African Americans were welcome outside of their own establishments and their own neighborhoods were Chinese restaurants.
Why?
The Chinese proprietors didn't seem to feel like enforcing the formal in the South or informal in the North, white strictures against having African-American customers at the same restaurant that had white customers.
It's interesting to me that I think about hospitality a lot, and I spend a lot of time in restaurants, but it's very interesting to think about it through the lens of being progressive, making society go forward, welcoming people, not because you necessarily, well, you do want their money and their business, but being welcoming to an entire group of people that haven't been welcome before. It's a brave act.
That's right. They are an agent of both democratization and also of discrimination, just like now.
In academic circles, I know the study of restaurants is a rather new thing, something you're pioneering in a lot of ways. I'm wondering if any of your colleagues think you're nuts.
I don't think they think I'm nuts. I think they indulge me since I'm allowed to have some interests given my relative age. But within the field, insofar as this interest has attracted notice, I think it does make some people uneasy or at least bemused.
I know that the restaurant world has been very excited about you.
I'm flattered, and I really mean it because, as I said, my natural habitat is medieval history. And I've had the good fortune to be esteemed by my maybe 100 colleagues in the United States who teach medieval history. So, yeah, it's a little odd for me. I wouldn't say, however, people are stopping me on the street or at the airport at this point to get my autograph. So check in with me when that happens.
What have you learned about yourself from writing this book?
Well, I never thought of myself as an extreme food enthusiast. It just seemed to me when I saw menus at the New York Public Library, and they seemed to be so unfamiliar. How did people eat this food? Why were they eating so many things that people don't like now? And in what setting? So that's really been my major intellectual change or shift, or I wouldn't say awakening, that's a little too spiritual, but change in my perspective. And I'm over 35 years away from my PhD, so I'm not a person just starting out in his career. So this has been a kind of rejuvenating experience for me.
Do you have a sandwich named after you anywhere yet?
Not yet, or neither a pizza variety, but I'm looking forward to that.
Paul, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Howie. It's been a lot of fun.
Paul Friedman's new book, 10 Restaurants That Changed America, is out this month. Check out an excerpt on livefrompриncestreet.com. Now it's time for our Madeleine Moment with Stranger Things star Matthew Modine.
Hey, I'm Matthew Modine. And this is my Madeleine Moment. My father was a drive-in theater manager. And when I was growing up, we used to spend a lot of time in the snack bar. And there was nothing that was more exotic than the smell of fresh popcorn being popped. You know, we used palm oil and salt and some kind of artificial butter and mixed that together with the unpopped popcorn kernels. And then this big machine would stir those things and stir them. As they were getting ready to pop, you could smell the kernels of corn. And then when it began to pop, it turned into a whole completely different kind of almost erotic smell of corn and smoke and burnt butter and burnt oil. There was nothing that was more delicious than the taste of those kernels just coming out of the kettle. Throw some salt on it and go sit down on the ground at my dad's drive-in, take a speaker from the speaker pole and put it on the ground, and we'd bring a little towel and put the towel down on the ground and watch these great American movies that used to play at my father's drive-in. I was born in Loma Linda, California, and the theater that we had in Loma Linda was called the Cherry Pass. The Cherry Pass was special because it was surrounded by cherry trees. And then we moved to Imperial Beach, California, next to Tijuana, and that drive-in was called the South Bay Drive-In, and it was surrounded by melons, cantaloupes, and watermelons, and tomatoes. The whole childhood is sort of tied to these smells of plants and trees and the fruits that came from them. Then we moved to Utah. We had, for the first time, we had a theater. It was in that theater that I met Robert Redford when he was passing through town doing publicity for a movie he'd made with Jane Fonda called Barefoot in the Park. And that was where my Madeleine moments kind of changed, because I got into the candy room. I'd figured out a way to get into the stock room where they kept all the candies. And there's something about the smell of the mixture of all those different candies and the cardboard boxes that they were in that has a whole nother kind of sensual experience. And I got into one of those boxes and ate maybe 1 or 2 boxes of Junior Mints. And to this day, I can't stand chocolate with mint because it made me really sick eating that much chocolate and mints. And then we moved to southern Utah to a little town called Orem, and the Geneva drive-in, named after Geneva Steel, the steel mill that was there on Lake Utah. And that drive-in was surrounded by apple trees and pear trees. But that popcorn, that smell stays with you. It was a constant that was at all of these places, all of these theaters, all of these drive-ins, that smell of popcorn. It was one reassuring thing that you could have in your life, moving from one place to another, that you knew that when you went into the snack bar that there'd be that one thing that was familiar to you, and that was that smell of popcorn. It takes me back to my father.
That's all for this month on Prince Street.
Thanks for coming.
Next month, we explore Triumph with Giorgio De Luca, Bangkok's Gagan Anand, and much more. And I'm hearing this time Malkovich's For Real, with our most surprising Madeleine moment yet.
My name is Thomas, and if I were a food, I would be a Kit Kat because people love it, so everyone would like me. My name is Darcy, and I want to be a pear because they're nice to eat.
Prince Street is produced by Elizabeth Robinson, Julian Plante, Rose Reed, Rob Corso, Caitlin Pierce, The Sound Distillery NYC, and executive produced by Charles Finch.
My name's Mommo. If I was a food, I would be a carrot because they're very tall and it's got orange on them, and orange is my favourite colour. My name's Jaffa, and I want to be ice cream so I can spin around and dance.
Theme music by Dave Brubeck. I'm your host, Howie Kahn. See you next time.
That's it from Live from Prince Street. Still hungry? Please subscribe on iTunes or on livefromprincestreet.com. Prince Street is brought to you by Dean & DeLuca, purveyors of the finest food since 1977. With over 40 stores around the world, Dean & DeLuca curates the best ingredients for life.